You're listening in on an animated discussion about Batman the Animated Series with two experts in their fields. I'm Joshua Unruh, superhero scholar.
And I'm Caleb Masters, your friendly neighborhood film critic extraordinaire from the senses-shattering. And today's topic is, look at this, Joshua, another two-parter. Season 1, episodes 60 and 61, The Demon's Quest, parts 1 and 2. That's right, Joshua. We're introduced today to Ra's al Ghul. Or is it Ra's al Ghul? Joshua, I need you to tell me, what's his name?
Well, that's a tough question, actually. If you ask the man who created him, it's Ra's.
Okay, Ra's. Okay.
The man who created him does not speak Arabic. And from what I understand, if you ask someone who actually speaks Arabic, it's much closer to Ra's.
Ah.
But I also feel like there's some diphthongs or whatever in there that I'm not going to be able to get right. But Ra's is closer to real life.
Okay, because Ra's, the only version I've heard Ra's is Batman Begins or the Nolan films, because even the Arkham games are Ra's.
Yes. And again, if you ask the man who created him, it's Ra's. But he's basing that off I don't know what. Because when Denny O'Neil on writing and Neil Adams on pencils created Ra's al Ghul, it was well before the era of Google. 1973.
Oh, back in the 70s. So you're saying that maybe there was not the cultural sensitivity or awareness of how to say this.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. And in fact, I'm going to say that in the case of Ra's al Ghul, and we will get more in depth on this here in a bit, but in the case of Ra's al Ghul, Denny O'Neil was specifically being culturally insensitive with him. He is very much supposed to fill a Yellow Peril Fu Manchu stereotype.
Well, I would never would have guessed with the cape and the mustache.
Yeah, I know.
Or the fact that in Christopher Nolan's movie, they even hint at it by casting Ken Watanabe as the faux Ra's al Ghul.
As your fake Ra's al Ghul.
Yeah. Huh.
So,
that's interesting. Okay, and that's something I know we're going to touch on in the conversation.
There's a lot more of that here. I just want to say, you're 100% right that not only did Denny not know, he didn't care. Like, because at the time he was doing something very specific, and the thing he was doing was the opposite of culturally sensitive. He was pulling a trope back from the 20s and 30s and bringing it into a new era. But let me pause there for a minute and talk about this new era of Batman, because that is the thing that Ra's represents as far as the comic books are concerned. You hear that date, 1973. Batman 66 runs from 66, 67, 68, briefly into 69. Massive backlash against it, both on television, like culturally, nobody wanted to see this anymore, and especially in the comic books. And this is really brought to the forefront with these two men, Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams, who go a long ways to bringing back the Dark Knight from his much earlier years. And also bringing in what I call the Batman of mystery, this globe-trotting kind of James Bond feel that's in this episode.
Oh my, if there was a globe-trotting Batman episode, this was it. And I felt all of the James Bond nods throughout the entire episode, let me tell you.
If you're ever seeing something in this episode, you're not exactly sure why it's here, it's probably here because it was in Batman comics that Denny and Neil did all those years ago. Shirtless, but still cowled Batman, they did it.
Yep.
Sword fights, they did it.
Yep.
We got to run around all over the world.
Yep.
They did it. But I love that stuff. I love what they did. And it's really, if you're looking at sort of the eras of Batman, it's absolutely fascinating to see these guys come in and decide that they want to do a much more realistic Dark Knight type character.
In the 70s.
And he immediately becomes this world's greatest detective who travels the world solving mysteries. When you do that again in the 80s, you get Batman Year One. Like, it's just really fascinating to kind of move through these things and see what the idea of a more street level or realistic Batman looks like in the decades. But that's the thing that Ra's and Talia represent for the comic book nerd. This is a new era of Batman.
We're going back. We're making him realistic in the 70s.
Or at least
more grounded,
grittier, at least darker. Right. We're going to stop having him come out during the day. You also had another artist from this time, is Jim Aparo, and you would have a lot of really like moody, dark, towering Batman. Very gothic. We're bringing all that stuff back, and then we're also going to take him around the world, fighting global threats like Ra's al Ghul in the League of Assassins.
Yeah, I think that's a nice touch. And of course, I think, Ra's al Ghul has taken on a new life, at least. So I actually had never interacted with the character before previously to seeing Batman Begins in 2005. But I think he's going to represent something more. Him in the League of Assassins, the League of Shadows, more kind of representing something of the Illuminati-esque sort of thing, or the Shadow Organization who's secretly running the world. I've seen it crops up again in Batman Under the Red Hood, which is that straight-to-DVD home video that I actually really like, where he contributes to the creation of the Red Hood.
Yes.
Also, of course, in Arkham City, he plays a key role as the puppeteer who's behind Dr. Hugo Strange. Dr. Hugo Strange is trying to become Ra's apprentice to be the next successor because Batman has said no. So, I mean, I feel like he's taken on a new life in the last... And he's been on multiple TV shows. I know he's been on Gotham. He's been on... I think he's been on Arrow.
He has been on Arrow, yeah. I mean, Arrow's deal is that he's kind of a, low-rent Batman. That's... I really like parts of Arrow, but on the label since day one, it's been, we're doing low-rent Batman. Watch us mine Batman's rogues gallery. And I was honestly a little shocked.
It was weird.
When they brought Ra's on, because he is... from a certain perspective, kind of a second-tier Batman villain, except that he'd had all this new life breathed into him fairly recently. It's pretty fascinating. But when we see this in 1993, he's basically unknown outside of the comic books. And we weren't even seeing him that much in the comic books for quite a while before then. Because remember, like I say, 1986 is Batman Year One. We're going to get real serious and real gritty, and Gotham City's a hellhole, and Batman punches muggers 100% of the time, and that's when the Joker really starts racking up the body count comparable to cholera. Like, all that stuff is going on in the 80s. We haven't seen him.
Right.
He was too big for that Batman. So when we see him in 1993, it's really been 15 years since anybody talked about him.
And this is where Bruce Timm and gang are like, well, we're going to dig even deeper into the well of villains because we've made it to season... Well, technically this is season 1, but we've got 60 episodes.
Yeah.
So who else we got who we haven't done before?
Well, I think in this case, this is really the comic book nerd contingent of the BTAS crew. Like the crew that showed up knowing something about Batman saying... No, we need to do a Ra's al Ghul episode because we had Talia show up before. Like the existence of Ra's al Ghul and all that entails had been teased in a previous episode. And you'll note, we'll talk about the title card in a minute there, but it doesn't start with the title card. What it starts with is written by Denny O'Neil, who is the creator of Ra's al Ghul. Again, these are hallmarks that the nerds would have noticed. God help me, noticed even in 1993, but this is them fan servicing themselves, I think.
Right. Getting a little bit indulgent as far as celebrating like really in the weeds Batman lore at the time.
Yeah, at the time. And what do? They accidentally give birth to this like whole new life for Ra's and Talia. It's pretty fantastic, honestly. And really, I don't think they expected it.
I don't think so either.
I think if you would ask them what they were doing, they would say, we're basically fan servicing ourselves. And if we go, that this is going to mean he's going to show up in everything for the next 30 years, they would be like, no, we don't see it. We don't see it.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the title card. So this is a first. Let's just jump right into it, Joshua. This is a first, I think, as far as I can tell, for me, at least in the episodes we've covered and the other episodes I've watched along the way, a cold open.
Yeah. The closest you get to a cold open
was the Laughing Fish.
To this is the Laughing Fish. And even that is more using their first shot as the title.
Well, yeah, because the shot is the sign of the Laughing Fish establishment back and forth. Here we just get it's raining, it's cold. We know who wrote the episode,
right?
But it feels
interesting though to you. You didn't even. This is not shade. You don't know who Denny O'Neil is, or if you do, it's only from listening to me, honestly. But you look at this and they lead with that. You don't even know that that's Robin sneaking around at first. Could be anybody. But what do we know? We know Denny O'Neil wrote this thing. It's a fascinating choice. I don't think it's accidental.
It feels like in this paired with the way they handle the title card in part 2, because I think we can talk about them as a package.
Yeah,
definitely.
Because
they're different. Because in part 2, there's not anything. There's not even a title card. It's just like they put the font in part 2, the weird font for the title, The Demon's Quest. Kind of lazy, kind of weird. It feels like, and you watched this as it aired.
Yes.
Correct? Did these not air together as one? Because it really feels like this is like part of a special event airing or something along those lines.
When I was watching it, they were not aired back to back, but they would have been aired back to back in days. Like I wouldn't see them back to back from 4 to 5 before my mom and dad got home, right? But I would have seen them at 4 on Thursday and 4 on Friday.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, still a strange choice because it feels like obviously it's part 1 and part 2, but the cold open signifies something was very special.
Yeah, you think?
Yeah. It feels special and different. And the way the epic scale, I was like, well, maybe they put this on as like a special episode or something, or because it feels weirdly incomplete and different. Not incomplete in the sense that it's like, why did they make these weird choices here?
So the 90s was a really interesting time for comics as a whole, and by interesting, I mainly mean bad. Like there's some upshots. There's definitely some really amazing work going on in the 90s, but as a whole, it's a lot of art driving sales of the books, and it's not always great art, and the writing's not very good. And I mean, really, it was a tough time. And for this group of people to, with purpose, nod back to a time when writing was considered a lot more important, and especially to this character, they go right to one of the big, the handful of big names that would have been known to Batman aficionados. I really think that they made it so special because they were celebrating Denny O'Neil.
Okay. Sure.
I can't explain anything else. Nothing else makes sense. Because I totally see what you're saying. And at the time, I don't recall what I thought at the time, but I really think that's what they're doing. They're nodding towards a time when everybody always wants to nod back towards the golden age of when they were a kid reading comics. Right. But in the 90s, you could actually do that. It was pretty rough. It was a rough go. And so they're, in this case, legitimately saying, look at once upon a time, this medium was treated better. People knew how to write things. Let's talk about those characters.
Sure.
I really think that's what was going on.
Okay. And it is a follow-up episode, as you mentioned. There's a previous episode where Talia shows up, and yeah. So I think, let's just jump into the episode. We've got Ra's Ghul, voiced by David Warner.
I really like his take.
I do too.
Yeah, it's really good. It's like menacing,
yes,
but not in the I'm personally going to break your bones way. Like we'll get a Bane eventually who has a much more like sort of masculine, meaty, I will personally do this thing to you. He's got a real mastermind feel.
Yes, definitely carries I don't know if it's not British, but it carries that hint of like kind of holds you at arm's length.
Yeah.
But I could kill you.
Yes, yeah.
Detective.
It's got a real Bond villain feel to it.
Oh,
right?
yes.
There's a real Blofeld kind of feel where we've got something of an accent, but it's a little indeterminate.
Right.
He's a little bit weird. Oh, he's in charge of a giant,
shadow
organization. He right away knows things he should not know by waltzing into the Batcave.
Right, just shows up. Oh, I know you're Bruce Wayne because I did all this research and talked to Talia and figured it out.
Cool enough. I like that they give that moment to Ra's because that's straight out of the comics also.
I buy it.
But I also really like how they allow Batman to turn those tables. I am Ra's al Ghul. Yeah, I've heard of the Demon's Head. I just thought it was fake. I'm in the business, okay?
They're totally trying to out detective each other.
Yeah, a little bit. And I'm down
you found
with
out me.
that.
Well, you're cool. I just didn't buy that whole myth.
And it's kind of kind of awesome that the idea that Ra's al Ghul would leave himself so in the shadows that it's just whispers, right? Maybe he's not a real thing. Maybe the League of Assassins isn't a real thing. And Batman's like, yeah, I've heard of it. I just didn't buy it. It's pretty cool.
But also you can see he's visibly annoyed when Ra's is dropping words about like, I know who you are. Oh, I figured out the secret to immortality. And Batman's like, oh my God, just shut up.
I don't like any
You're
of this.
so full of yourself. Also, in true Bond villain fashion, he has a muscle muscle sidekick,
his Jaws,
henchman.
his odd jobs.
Yes, exactly. Ubu, which is part of the Orientals.
Yeah. So I still want to keep talking about the good stuff.
Yeah,
and push the Orientalism problem towards the end.
Sure. Okay.
But you're not wrong. You're getting two things combined here. You're getting the Bond villain because that international Batman of mystery thing was on purpose. That was the thing O'Neil and Adams did on purpose and said so. So you are getting this is my odd job or this is my Jaws feel from Ubu. But of course, it's also got to be a dude who's dressed like he just got here from a production of Aladdin.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, you know, it's both of these things together. But it's still, I like the interplay between them. I really like the humanity that we see in Batman when Ra's coughs, when it's clear that Ra's is sick.
Right.
And Batman's response every time is, are you okay? Like widening of the eyes, or do you need anything?
A lot of widening of the eyes.
Yeah. Which is really cool. I really like to see that humanity in Batman. He doesn't know who this guy is. Mm-hmm. He probably believes he's more or less who he says he is, because look, he has all this extensive equipment and access to things and walked into my Batcave. He's not nobody, but he's also a sick old man. Mm-hmm. And I have a reaction to that. It's very cool. Very good.
Yeah, and I really appreciate on top of the globetrotting, so he goes to Calcutta.
Yes.
I love that he goes to Malaysia and Batman. Okay, so here's another thing. On top of the globetrotting, this episode is full of classic because he's Batman moments.
Yeah.
He captures a Black Panther in his cowl and gasses him.
It's pretty good, though.
Because he's Batman. Because he can do that.
Yes, to a certain extent, but also he doesn't like stand up and punch the thing, which we've seen him do to like alligators and stuff.
Yes.
He thinks it through, you know?
Sure.
I'm just saying, the reason I bring that up, there's a lot of really good detective things going on in these episodes.
Tons of good detective stuff.
And I think that's a wise choice for a lot of reasons, but especially because that's the thing that Ra's respects about Batman most. I mean, he calls him detective, not Batman, not Bruce Wayne.
Detective.
Always detective. And play it up. You know, the fact that Batman's always one step ahead of him is really good. Even to the point when he doesn't want to kill the Panther. Just saying, I like it.
It was hilarious. Well, that was part of how Batman figured out that Ra's was setting him up.
Yep. Yeah.
Because it was the only time that Ubu did not let him get ahead.
It's a really good moment. And I don't recall if I noticed it, when I was a kid. I have a bad reputation for figuring the movies out. Like people don't want to watch mystery movies with me. I'm not proud. I also accidentally figure out my Christmas presents, and it has caused some friction in my life.
Why would you do that, Joshua?
I don't do it on purpose. The point is, I don't remember if I figured that out at the time. But even on this rewatch, as soon as he said it, I was like, you're right. Denny O'Neil is even hanging a lampshade on the fact because Batman's counting down until he gets to punch Ubu in the face.
Oh, yeah. Just waiting for it. He's just like, all right, man, I've had enough. I do appreciate the animation here is pretty stellar. We got really outside of Gotham. We go to countries around the world, and it shows, and it looks wildly different from what we've seen on the show before. I think it's good. I really liked how Batman and Ra's, and this is all in part one, we're still talking part one stuff, have this philosophical difference about like the roles as heroes, because of course Ra's is married to like protecting the planet, protecting the environment, versus Batman, who's more or less protecting the people. Not anti-environment.
It's that is a really interesting conversation
because he concedes that Ra's al Ghul is not incorrect, but the methods are kind of crazy. And he begs the question. He's like, well, who has the power to actually lead the charge? He's like, well, I would like to consider.
I will.
Yeah,
I will.
And
I really like that conversation. Wealth won't save it. What is required is power. And I'm like, listen to the man who denies wealth as power. That is either frightfully naive or that man's thinking big picture.
Very
and
big.
with Ra's al Ghul, we know it's not naivete. He's thinking big picture. Yeah.
Yeah, and I also think it's interesting. The note I had too was how more in modern era, it's less about the planet, more about the ideas of justice and cleansing the planet of scum. Less about saving the planet with Ra's al Ghul.
It comes and goes. It really changes. The eco-terrorist thing is in the DNA that O'Neil and Adams left with him, and it gets changed for Nolan's Batman quite a bit to bring it more.
Well, even in Nolan's Batman, like since Nolan's Batman, I think that line's been skewed a little bit.
Yes, definitely. I mean, which is interesting because I feel like we're going to see a swing back in the pendulum to where Ra's as long-lived eco-terrorist is going to come back. Like we thought we were doing okay there towards the end of the 80s and into the 90s. We thought like maybe we were pulling the planet back from the brink. We are not, right? So I think we're going to see the swing back.
Oh, yeah.
It definitely does sharpen the distinction between them when Ra's ideas of what justice are clash so hard with Batman.
Right.
I totally understand why that shift happened, but I think Ra's eco-terrorist has
I like
a lot more legs.
I like a little bit of both.
And Talia really, in the comic books, took the queen of crime, like queen of international crime thing, way further than Raish ever did. And honestly, he's going to live in her shadow in the comics now if he just stays as international crime lord.
Okay. Fascinating stuff. Talia al Ghul's another great character. I will say one note. Again, we're talking about things we like generally, but she gets the short end of the stick in both
she definitely
parts
does.
1 and 2.
She really does. I mean, she's another trope from an earlier time that eventually gets surpassed in the comic books, but it is even then 10 or 15 years after these episodes that she really starts to come into her own.
She's a Bond girl, which is weird because she was the feature of a previous episode where she was like the main bad
really
guy.
Good.
But here, because Raish has showed up,
Raish is here,
and it feels like a Bond movie. She's the Bond girl role. Like she's just the arm candy. She loves Bruce, and we know that. And she doesn't really do anything.
No, this is in such stark contrast to her last appearance too, where she was such a mover and shaker, and you could really see Bruce going, I think I kind of like that girl.
Right.
You know, kind of like we've talked about with Catwoman, where it's like, we could share a part of my life I didn't think I could share with my romantic partner. Mm-hmm. But I don't know anything about her, you know? And then we find out more about her, and she just fades, wilts into the background. Really damseled a lot, multiple times.
So much.
She has one moment of power when she's the one who brings Raish out of his madness in the second part.
Yes.
That's about it.
Yep.
The rest of the time, it's really not great for Talia.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we could probably go ahead and jump into part 2 at this point.
There's a lot of good stuff. Batman counting down on Ubu, Batman not having time for this nonsense, and Robin being like, well, okay, because he knows enough to know he's behind the curve. There's a lot of good stuff. So let's talk about the stuff that's really bad.
So Orientalism is bad, Joshua.
Yes, it's very bad.
And it is definitely a thing that's, especially in the 80s and 90s, was at a height. Do you think Aladdin era? It's weird.
Oh my goodness. Okay. No. There
are 2 different forms of this, I'm just saying.
Yeah, no, totally. And there's a little bit of interesting history going on here, right? Like the trope that O'Neil and Adams were very specifically pulling from was yellow peril.
Right.
Much more so than Orientalism
was
yellow peril, which is not just the people from the Far East are exotic and strange, let's be fascinated by them, but they will show up and murder us in our beds.
Right.
You see this in a lot of the fiction at the time with Fu Manchu is the biggest example, Sax Rohmer's long-running series of novels, but it creeps into our science fiction of the time too with Ming the Merciless. Ming the Merciless is very much a yellow peril villain taken to space. And then it seems like we kind of let it go after World War II because we realized that we were kind of jerks about it.
Kind of awful.
And we let it doesn't go away, but it tamps down. But it was way in vogue in the 90s.
Well, and you can't forget Vietnam, post-Vietnam. That idea that came back up in the Vietnam era.
It's true in a different way. Now the threat was much more. I mean, I hate to say it like this. We're talking about really racist ideas, but the idea that Sax Rohmer and that Flash Gordon were playing with was the idea that we would get out masterminded, right? Like that there was a devious turn to the East Asian mind. You get a much more, I hate to say it again, but here we are, a much more like brute, terrifying, they're just going to invade us in sheer number feel from Vietnam.
Right.
Definitely.
Right.
It's gross. And it never went away.
It never quite went away.
It changes, it evolves.
Well, it's interesting.
Or devolves. It's gross.
Interesting because Ra's al Ghul is portrayed as a white guy, but he has all these different like his archetype. Like he's just the way he looks might be a white guy, but he's got the archetype of a lot of the get careful on here.
No, here's what I'm going to say. They do position him in a lot of ways as Caucasian in the show. It's
kind of ambiguous.
Yes, that's what I should say. That's the best way to put it. It's ambiguous because he has an Arabic name, but his coloring is not wildly dissimilar from Bruce Wayne's, but he is given some sort of like sunken eyes and other kind of racist visual tags that he's not white.
Right.
And really, he shouldn't be white. That was the thing that, at least in the comic books, they were very clear with all the time. He's Arabic right from jump. and always has been all 600 years that he's been alive.
Now, that leads to kind of the second layer, which is kind of the fear of people from the Middle East, Aladdin era.
Let me say.
So Ubu, for example.
Here's your film guy stuff, right? We were getting an Orientalism sort of reboot in the 90s.
Yes.
Rising Sun was a very popular. We're starting to get Yakuza movies and things like that. And then, of course, 9/11 happens. Right.
And it really amps back up big time.
Yeah. We've moved it west, like to the Middle East now, instead of the Far East. And it's so fascinating to me that Denny O'Neil knew that he could not just do another straight up Chinese mastermind, that would be too much. And he thought he was safe in the early 70s using someone from the Middle East, an Arabic person. Just to show you that if you give us long enough, we'll get mad as Americans at any ethnic group eventually.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You would never get. And I mean, I think that this is why Nolan shies away from what would otherwise so obviously be an Arabic character, is that means something different now than it did in 1973.
Oh, most definitely.
Completely different.
Yes, completely different.
And not good if you're trying to not trade in racist stereotypes.
Right. So big fail on that front, and because of the way the characters talk, the actions they do, like the architecture of the buildings they're attacking, it's very, very, very Orientalist.
Oh yeah, we get in Calcutta, we get guys who wandered in to murder Batman straight off of the set from Temple of Doom.
Yes.
Like we basically get thuggy cultists, which is a pretty racist approach to, I mean, Indiana Jones never claimed to be anything else. But
Okay, yeah, no, that's actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because it actually ties into what you were talking about earlier with the Bond villains too, and Indiana Jones. I think they both fall into this trap. This might be a thing that's homaging those things.
Right.
But guys, let's sit back and realize those things are also racist.
Yes,
So like,
yes.
just because you're homaging something, if you're homaging something that's racist, it's still racist.
It's still racist. It really is.
Because
It really
Indiana
is.
Jones and Temple of Doom, guys, I'm just throwing this out there. And listen, I like things about that movie, but that movie is hella racist.
It really is. It very much approaches the thuggy from a British viewpoint. And I'm not an expert in this, so I'm going to leave it at that.
Yes.
But
yeah, okay, actually, I should probably rear down a little bit. But
no,
we're
really,
not
no,
expert,
no.
But it's pretty
not
evident.
good.
No, it's
it's
good.
bad. Like they're doing things on purpose, and they're doing them again on purpose in this potentially reimagining. We could have sort of reimagined Ra's al Ghul.
Oh, yeah.
Even keeping the name. I mean, to greater and lesser degrees, this has been done by Nolan.
Yeah.
Again on Arrow. It's been reimagined in ways that were less racially insensitive, but we weren't interested in doing that in 1993. We went to get the guy who did it the first time, and we just did it again.
He did it again, yeah. Yep.
And in the process, we lessen Talia. She's dressed like I Dream of Jeannie the whole time.
Oh my gosh! Oh, especially in part 2 when she was in that scantily clad stuff. I was like,
So
good
bad.
grief! And the other thing that I kept coming to my mind was Lawrence of Arabia.
Yes,
was another thing.
yeah.
I felt that scantily clad woman of the Middle East vibe thing going on heavy, and I was like, it made me feel a little bit gross.
Yeah, no, there's a lot to enjoy. Just like almost every other piece of media that I've mentioned here, there's a lot to enjoy in these 2 episodes. There's a lot to enjoy in Fu Manchu novels, in Indiana Jones films. There really are. All of your faves are problematic.
It's true.
That's just because people are problematic.
Right.
And so I think that it's perfectly fine for us to enjoy Ra's al Ghul as a character, and perfectly fine for us to enjoy these 2 episodes. The line that we should not cross is pretend that they aren't super racist caricatures.
Right. Well, because the things are great. Like, I think the things are great. I think the plot in part 2, this whole Orpheus, like, it is totally a Blofeld. Like, we're gonna put bombs in all the Lazarus pits around the world, and then it's going to implode, and we're gonna rebuild civilization from the ground up. I'm like, oh, this is the Bondiest. Using a satellite. It is like the Bondiest of Bond plots ever. And it's great. It's super fun. And then the sword fight. That's awesome.
Yes.
I love the sword fight.
And again, I really like Ra's as eco-terrorist. I mean, I think that we're back to a place where that can really speak to us again. And I like it. I like immortal, scary guys.
Yes.
Although, again, because of who it is, that's very much a Fu Manchu.
Also, I have a couple more because he's Batman moments I want to throw out there.
Yeah, and let's end on high notes. Let's talk about how awesome Batman really is in these
firstly,
2 episodes.
Batman infiltrates the desert fortress wearing both his cowl and one of those outfits. I
love it.
Yeah,
I love
that was
it.
hilarious.
I love it when Batman puts disguises on over his disguises.
Over his disguise, yes. Okay, my favorite, here's the because Batman moment. While fighting Ubu, he gets thrown up to a wall and then lands on his feet on the wall and backflips and springs off of the wall behind Ubu so he can punch him.
Yep.
Because he's Batman.
Because he's Batman.
Like when you actually watch it, you're like, wait, did he just do what I think he did? Okay. Another thing. He blew up the satellite with the sword.
Yes.
I mean,
or at least he blew up the dish that was communicating with the satellite.
Yes, but he threw a sword, at a very
like a
tiny,
dart.
Yes, like a dart at a tiny target, which brought down the satellite.
Yeah.
Because he's Batman.
I mean, I like it, and I get that this was a show that's very action heavy, and normally I'm a big fan of that, but wouldn't it have been nicer if we'd had a moment between him and Talia, and later Talia would turn against Raish to save the planet because of her beloved?
That would have been way more interesting.
That would have been more interesting.
Also,
although I like the sword throw, I'm not going to lie.
I thought it was tons of fun. And let me throw this out there about Talia. This is, of course, we're going to end it on a high note, I promise. But one other thing that irked me about her final shot in this episode is terrible. Okay, so they go in. Talia's saddened by the death of her father. They get one last romantic kiss in front of a sunrise, nonetheless. Mm-hmm. And then Batman just leaves. She's like, what's going to happen to me? He kisses her and leaves. He doesn't say anything. He just kisses her. It's
a little too
leaves.
macho.
I was like, you just left her in the middle of the desert after you killed her dad? Batman.
Cool job, Bruce.
Come on, Batman.
You're very good at emotions, obviously.
I can see. But no worries. He didn't actually kill Ra's al Ghul because dun dun dun, he's still alive. I think we're good. I think we can talk about our alternate media recommendations now. Don't you think, Caleb? I think that's a great idea, Joshua. And I'm going to throw one at you right now.
Yeah, tell me.
We probably talked about it before.
Mine is super inside baseball, so let's start with yours.
I'm just going to throw out Brendan Fraser's The Mummy, 1999. I think that's a super fun movie. I love it.
Okay, I'm faint right now. I love The Mummy.
I do too. It's a great movie.
I came out of The Mummy the second date that I went on with the woman I would eventually marry, by the way. Yeah, she nearly tore my rotator cuff because she's not good at jump scares. And Mummy legit has some good jump scares.
It does.
I came out of that saying, I am ready for my 200 Mummy movies. My Brendan Fraser. I found my Indiana Jones replacement.
No, I really thought, like, it. Okay, when you watch that movie, it feels like so much like a spiritual successor to Indiana Jones.
Yes.
Like, it gets all the Indiana Jones things right. So, it's in a desert, fighting supernatural beings who are immortal, who have powers. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
And
frankly, you should be watching The Mummy thrice weekly just on its own merits.
Because it's that great. Lawrence of Arabia, as I mentioned earlier, I think is a great pairing. And Bond film, favorite, GoldenEye, also problematic. I don't care. I still like it. It's problematic. I still like it. Sean Bean's the bad guy. Oh, spoilers. It's a great movie.
So, because we get such a bad Talia in this, and I want to set that record straight. Right? I really want to set that record straight because
that's fair.
Because she had been introduced on the show so well, and then immediately she's wilting flower. And like I said, it would take 10 or 15 more years after these episodes before a really good Talia percolated into the comic books. But she absolutely peaked with a short run, and then she would come back later. But we'll deal with the short run first that I did a Superhero University series on. The series is Batman and Son. Okay. She is the shadowy villain pulling all of the strings behind it. You really see this is her stepping out of her father's shadow and out of Bruce Wayne's shadow, frankly, and next leveling her stuff. She becomes, this is the beginnings of her as international queen of crime that has done more and more scary things than Ra's ever dreamed of. And it begins in Batman and Son. So it's written by Grant Morrison, personal favorite of mine, and drawn by Andy Kubert. It's beautiful. You also get an introduction of another favorite new character of mine that I'm not going to talk about because if you haven't read it, you should be surprised. But it's a book called Batman and Son, so just file that away.
So a new character in a Batman and Son comic.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's on the label. But that initial 4 issues of what would become several years of Grant Morrison writing the best Batman has ever been. is a really great starting point. I've done a deep dive into it on Superhero University. So if you read it and you like it, but you feel like there's more going on, there probably is. Go listen to those episodes of me really unpack it, because it is a series that deserves to be unpacked. It's really good.
Excellent. Check it out. Batman and Son.
Well, that about wraps up this animated discussion. Caleb, where can people go to continue the conversation with you?
Well, Joshua, you can always find me on Twitter talking about film, television, video games, and all sorts of other pop culture goodness at C Masters Talk. That's letter C Masters Talk. I'm also the editor-in-chief and film critic at the Cinematropolis, and we publish these in-depth essays on all types of different films, oftentimes including science fiction and superhero films, all the stuff you'd want to read about. And you can find all these articles at thecinematropolis.com. Joshua, what about you?
I'm also most active on Twitter, where you can find me easily enough at Joshua Unruh. And remember that an animated discussion is a Pulp Diction Productions program and is 100% supported by listeners like you. To find out how you can keep this and our other shows in production, check out patreon.com/Pulp Diction Productions.
Well, Joshua, in our next episode, we're going to go back to our fight with artificial intelligence when we discuss Season 1, Episode 62, His Silicon Soul.
Until next time, we'll see you back here. Same bat time, same bat channel.